On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we have Mr. Curtis Franklin and Mr. Bryan McHenry here today. Curtis gives us a quick tease of Black Hat Europe. Plus, we talk about Apple's dependency on remote services in Big Sur, and it's causing performance issues for organizations. Plus, we talk about how Cloudflare and Apple might have a solution to securing DNS. We'll see if it works. And our guest today, Senior Product Manager with Pulse Secure, Bryan Embrey, and we talk with him about securely accessing your multi-cloud and data center applications with zero trust assurance. Shouldn't miss it. TWiT on the set. This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Securing every access point in your company doesn't have to be a challenge. LastPass unifies access and authentication to making securing your employees simple and secure, even when they're working remotely. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 422, recorded December 11th, 2020. Is remote access growing up? This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Expressvpn. Stop letting people keep logs of what you do online and protect your online privacy with one click. For 3 extra months free with a 1-year package, go to expressvpn.com/enterprise. And by LastPass. Don't wait till the end of the year to get strong security. Start solidifying your cybersecurity strategy with the award-winning LastPass today. Go to lastpass.com/twit to find out how they can help you. And by Melissa. Like expired milk, 30% of your customers' data goes bad every year. That's money down the drain. Visit Melissa's developer portal for free access to data quality APIs, demos, and code samples. Freshen up your sour data today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. Welcome to TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that's dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through this big, giant world of the enterprise. But I can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the professionals, the experts in their field, starting with Mr. Bryan McHenry. He's the Senior Director of Global Security Solutions at F5. Bam. It's always great to have you back on. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. Finally got my office painted, so I'm pretty excited not to have a cave-like ambiance down here anymore. But as you can see, there's still some artwork to hang up and decorate the wall behind me.
What happened to the Boba Fett? I was looking forward to seeing that.
He's out just adjacent. I can bring him in during the commercial break if you're missing him.
Very cool, very cool. Now it's snowing over there on the right coast for you, right?
Yeah, we got about 1 or 2 inches 2 days ago, but it's already gone away. But we're expecting more in the next few weeks. It looks like we might get a snowy winter after all.
Yeah, I miss the snow over here in the Pacific Northwest. But, speaking of busy and security, we also have another security enterprise expert and our favorite journalist, Mr. Curtis Franklin. He's the senior editor at darkreading.com. Curtis, I'm going to take a wager and say that it's not even close to snowing in your neck of the woods, huh?
I was going to say it's not snowing here, and we're not missing it. Not one little bit. It was actually kind of cool for us. Earlier this week, I had to go out and cover up the citrus tree and make sure it was all warm and cozy because it went down into the upper 30s. But with any luck at all, that was winter for us. And we enjoyed it, wrung all the joy we could out of it, and are ready to get back to normal temperatures now.
Indeed. Now, you just rolled off a week of Black Hat Europe, right? Anything exciting and informative at the show?
Black Hat Europe was this week, and we had a really good experience in the show. It was, as the U.S. version of Black Hat was, a virtual event, but participation was outstanding, and the sorts of things we were hearing a lot about included a number of tools for both red team and blue team use. And one of the keynotes was fascinating. I had done an interview with Bunny Huang out of Hong Kong, and he's developed a way to do zero trust for hardware. In other words, it's one thing to say that we're going to have zero trust for the individuals who are logging into a network, but how about the devices they're using? How do we know that their mobile device, for example, hasn't been rooted, hasn't been compromised? He's come up with a way to do that. He was explaining that. And as with many of these, he's offering a lot of the plans and a lot of the intellectual property to the community so that others can go through and check it, can verify it, can use it and improve on it. You know, that releasing things into the public domain or using copyleft or Creative Commons is something we're seeing more of in the security world. I'm all for it because I think there's some real creativity right now in cybersecurity. And with any luck at all, at least half of that creativity is going to be on the side of the good guys.
Right. Well, zero trust, that's great you brought that up because, you know, that's going to come up again when we bring in our guest. So thank you guys for being here. We have a really packed show. Now, as Cheever gets ready to truck across the U.S., we need to discuss this week's enterprise and IT news. Now, anytime applications depend on remote services, you risk performance issues and downtime. We'll talk about how Apple's dependency on their certificate service in Big Sur, just how it can affect you and your organization. Plus, we've talked a lot about DNS before and how it falls short in security. Well, Apple and Cloudflare actually think that they might have a solution for it with their major change. We'll get into that. Plus, your organization might have a hybrid IT environment as you move to the cloud. And are you able to secure it? Well, today we have Bryan Embrey. He's the Senior Product Marketing Manager with Pulse Secure, and he's going to talk about accessing your hybrid and multi-cloud environment securely with a zero trust assurance. But it's been a busy week in the IT news, so let's go ahead and jump into this week's blips. So Death Stalker, does that sound scary to you? Well, this is a pseudonym used by a hacker for a hire group that will target anyone you want for the right price. Now, this threat actor has been around since at least 2012, and they drew attention of the security researchers at Kaspersky's back in 2018. They have a distinctive attack characteristic that don't resemble actually any group employed by cyber criminals or state-sponsored hackers. Now, the group is now known for using a wide range of malware strains and complex delivery chains in its attack, but the tactics used to evade detection make them stand out. Now, what makes them stand out this past week is the discovery of a new malware strain designed to avoid detection on Windows PCs. It's known as the PowerPepper implant. It's a PowerShell-based power processing implant. Now, PowerPepper malware is a in-memory Windows PowerShell-based backdoor that has the capability to allow its operators to execute shell commands remotely from a command control server. Now, as the case with Death Stalker's previous work, PowerPepper tries to evade detection or sandboxes execution on Windows 10 using various tricks. Now, some of these are actually detecting mouse movements, filtering a client's MAC addresses, and adapting its execution flow depending on which antivirus products are installed on the targeted machine. Now, the malware spreads via spear phishing email attachments or by links to attachments that contain malicious VBA or Visual Basic for application macros that execute PowerPepper and gain persistence on an infected machine. Now, PowerPepper also uses several delivery chain invasion techniques, actually, and such as hiding in payloads. Now, these include word-embedded shape properties using Windows compiled HTML files as archives for malicious files, and in fact, masquerading and obfuscating using stenography, getting lost in Windows shell commands translation, and executing via signed binary proxy execution. They have some unique stuff here. Now, what can you and your organization do to avoid falling victim to PowerPepper? Well, the first line of defense, user education. That's right. You'll need to train more people to avoid opening attachments or clicking on links and emails from unknown senders and enabling macros and documents from unverified sources. Good luck and happy holidays.
Well, we know that FireEye was breached. What we don't know yet is what it all means. FireEye's revelation earlier this week that it had been infiltrated by a nation-state hacking operation that stole its red team hacking tools served as a chilling reminder to the security industry that no one is impermeable to an attack, not even a major incident response company more accustomed to probing and cleaning up the breaches of other high-profile organizations. Several reports and sources say Russia's SVR Foreign Service Agency, also known as AP-29 or Cozy Bear, was the perpetrator. Now, there are still plenty of unknowns about the attack. such as how the attackers got initial access to FireEye systems, what defenses they bypassed, and how, whether any Windows 0 days were used, and just what, if any, internal information they accessed on what FireEye CEO Kevin Mandier described as their ultimate target, quote, certain government customers, end quote, of the company. Now, it is still unclear whether APT29 accessed any sensitive product information or FireEye intel on other threat actors. Dmitry Alperovich, former CTO and co-founder of CrowdStrike, says he believes the red team tool theft likely wasn't part of the original plan by the attackers. Quote, I actually think the red team tools were probably an opportunistic grab. Hey, while we're there, we might as well download them, end quote. While FireEye attempted to defang the attacker's ability to use its tools in attacks by publishing detailed mitigations, experts say APT29 or Cozy Bear could use the purloined red team tools to glean intel on its clients' weaknesses, or even as a means to cause confusion and sow distrust to trademarks of Russian intelligence.
And as if the ransomware attacks against hospitals weren't bad enough, dozens of radiology projects from the GE Healthcare contain a critical vulnerability that threatens the networks of hospitals and other health providers that use the devices, officials from the U.S. government and a private security firm said on Tuesday. The devices, used for CT scans, MRIs, X-rays, mammograms, ultrasounds, and positron emission or PET tomography, use a default password to receive regular maintenance. The passwords are available to anyone who knows where on the internet to look, of course. A lack of proper access restrictions allows the devices to connect to malicious servers rather than only those designated by GE Healthcare. Attackers can exploit these shortcomings by abusing the maintenance protocols to access the devices. From there, it's easy. The attackers can execute malicious code or view or modify patient data stored on the device or the hospital or healthcare provider servers. Aggravating matters. Customers can't fix the vulnerability themselves. Instead, they must request that GE Healthcare support team change the credentials. Customers who don't make such a request will continue to rely on the default password. Eventually, the device manufacturer will provide patches and additional information. The flaw has a CVSS severity rating of 9.8 out of 10 because of the impact of the vulnerability combined with the ease of exploitation. Security firm CyberMDX discovered the vulnerability and privately reported it to the manufacturer in May. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is advising infected healthcare providers to take mitigation steps as soon as possible.
Now, we all know and love Mr. Steve Wozniak. He's co-founder of Apple and the genius behind the first Apple computer engineering. Now, Steve is actually quite picky when it comes to hearing pitches about new companies and ideas. Now, he's overwhelmed with them daily. However, it seems that something has tickled his fancy because after 45 years, he's starting his second company. Now, wondering what it is? Well, it's called Efforce, and it's a green tech and blockchain space company. Now, Efforce, which has been in stealth mode for almost a year, is a marketplace for corporate or industrial building owners to have, quote, green projects funded. Now, a company to help start other companies is very meta for Steve. According to Efforce, investors can participate in energy-efficient projects by acquiring tokenized future savings. Now, will companies benefit from such improvements at no cost? Now, using blockchain, a smart contract redistributes the result savings to token holders and companies without intermediaries based on exact consumption savings data. According to Wozniak, energy consumption and CO2 emissions worldwide have grown exponentially, leading to climate change and extreme consequences to our environment. Now, we can improve that energy footprint and lower our consumption without changing our habits. Now, they're trying to save the environment simply by making more energy improvements. Now, Wozniak created Efforce to be the first decentralized platform that allows everyone to participate and benefit financially from worldwide energy efficient projects and create meaningful environmental changes. Now, the company's cryptocurrency token, trading under the token named WozX, has been made public December 3rd on HBTC, a marketplace for decentralized currencies, and will launch a BitThumb Global, another marketplace for decentralized currencies, next week, according to a Medium post about the company. Now, Efforce allows business owners to safely register their energy upgrade projects on the web and secure funding all types of investors worldwide. Now, the companies will have more available cash to use for critical projects such as infrastructure or hiring. And if you're looking for some funding for your energy efficient projects in the near future, you might want to take a look at Efforce.
Well, ransomware now makes up half of all major incidents. Ransomware attacks made up the majority of serious cyber intrusions this year, accounting for 51% of all incidents investigated by CrowdStrike in 2020, according to the company's yearly incident analysis report. Financially motivated crimes accounted for 63% of the more than 200 incidents the company investigated on behalf of new and existing clients, the firm stated in its new report. Of those, 81%, or 51% of all incidents, saw the deployment of ransomware or tools that typically result in a ransomware infection, the company said. Cybercriminals have completed their change in direction from attacks that focus on stealing personally identifiable information to sell online to disrupting corporate operations in an attempt to score a 6 or 7-digit ransom, said Sean Henry, president of CrowdStrike Services and chief security officer for the company. Ransomware and its ability to disrupt operations has made ransomware the most notorious threat facing companies, especially after the WannaCry and NotPetya global cyber attacks of 2017. The CrowdStrike report also suggests that attackers keep coming back to target the same companies, with 68% of organizations facing a second attack within 12 months of their initial incident.
And in startup news, cloud security firm Lightspin has emerged from stealth. There's a new startup founded by former white hat hackers emerged from stealth today with a $4 million seed round to close cloud security gaps in business environments. This Tel Aviv-based company was founded earlier this year to address the problem of ensuring security in the cloud, a technology its founders say drives opportunity for growth but brings a wave of new security challenges. It's something we've discussed quite a bit here on TWiT over the years. This includes configuration vulnerabilities and the complexity of the shared security model. These complexities put companies at risk of exploitation by criminals seeking to take advantage of these shortfalls. And as cloud environments grow, so does the need for staff to maintain security systems. Now, this new startup seeks to address cloud security posture management with tools that attempt to address these errors and misconfigurations that may create a lot of noise while concealing important security incidents.
Facebook is back in the news again, and this time they're pointing the finger at a hacker group who's known for its robust and custom-made malware. Now, earlier this year, researchers uncovered at least 8 unusual sophisticated Android apps hosted in the Google Play Store. Many of them have been there since 2018. Now, Ocean Lotus repeatedly bypassed Google's app vetting process, in part by submitting benign versions of the apps and later actually updating them to add backdoors and malicious functionality. Now, FireEye published this detailed report on Ocean Lotus in 2017, and BlackBerry has more recent information here. Now, this past week, Facebook actually identified a Vietnamese IT firm, CyberOne Group, as being linked to Ocean Lotus. Now, the group lists an address in the Ho Chi Minh City area. Now, emails sent to the company seeking comment returned an error message that said the email server was actually misconfigured. Now, the naming of CyberOne Group isn't the first time researchers have publicly linked a government-backed hacking group to real-world organizations. Now, in 2013, researchers from Mandiant, now part of the security firm FireEye, identified a 12-story office tower in Shanghai, China, as the nerve center for Comment Crew, a hacking group that was responsible for hacks on more than 140 organizations over the previous 7 years. Now, the building was the headquarters of the People's Liberation Army Unit 61398. Now, Facebook said it's removing the ability of Ocean Lotus to abuse the company's platform, but Facebook said it expected the group's tactics to evolve, but that improved detection systems will make it harder for a group to evade the exposure. Now, either this is a legitimate movement for Facebook to rid the platform of bad actors, or it's a way for them to change the narrative and the finger pointing during their investigations. Either way, let's hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, the bites. But before we get to the bites, we have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Expressvpn. Now, earlier this year, more than 100 Twitter users got their accounts hacked. Passwords, email addresses, phone numbers, and more, all taken from these high-profile people. Now, these kinds of attacks are getting more frequent and more severe, and it's not just Twitter. It's Facebook, it's eBay, it's Uber, it's Adobe, it's Yahoo. They have leaked data such as passwords, credit card information, driver's licenses belonging to billions of users. That's why I use ExpressVPN to safeguard my personal data online, no matter where I'm at. According to recent reports, hackers can make up to $1,000 from selling someone's personal information on the dark web, making people like me and you lucrative targets. Now, ExpressVPN is an app that actually funnels your data through a secure encrypted tunnel, so no matter the device you use, you can have a peace of mind every time you use the internet. Now, the app connects with just one click. It's lightning fast, and the best part of ExpressVPN works on up to 5 devices simultaneously, so you and your whole family can stay protected. Now, if a breach can happen to powerful individuals, it can easily happen to you. Protect yourself with ExpressVPN, the VPN rated #1 by CNET, Wired, and countless others. Now, when you do end up going back and traveling, I actually like this, having additional layers of trust for my connections. I travel globally, and I can tell you ExpressVPN adds a peace of mind for me. It makes me feel comfortable that my traffic is private no matter where I'm at. Even if you're using Wi-Fi at a business you usually don't visit, it adds another layer of protection, and it just has me thinking about all the personal data I send over that connection, and I don't need the connection owners seeing it. And if you visit expressvpn.com/enterprise right now, you can arm yourself with an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. That is expressvpn.com/enterprise. Visit expressvpn.com/enterprise to learn more. And we thank ExpressVPN for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for the bites. Now, gone are the days of applications that solely work in an offline fashion. Eventually, they have to connect to the internet to either recharge or even get an update. Now, with Apple's latest Big Sur release, they have created a more strict dependency on the internet with their app verification process. Now, the question is this a bad thing? We'll get into that. Now, last week, Mac users actually everywhere began complaining of a crippling slowdown when actually opening their applications. Now, the cause? Online certificate checks Apple performs each time a user opens an app not downloaded from the App Store. Now, the mass upgrade to Big Sur, it seems, caused the Apple servers responsible for those checks to slow to a crawl. Now, Apple quickly fixed the slowdown, but even bigger worries soon replaced concerns about paralyzed Macs. Now, vast amounts of personal data Apple and possibly others can glean from Macs performing certificate checks each time a user opens an app that didn't come from the App Store. They actually send this data out. Now, there was a little reason to view the certificate checks as a privacy grab for people who understand what's happening behind the scenes. Now, to be sure, Apple on Monday actually published a support article that should actually stop the lingering worries, but you should go read it. It's pretty interesting. Now, before Apple allows an app into the App Store, it must first pass a review that vets its security. Now, users can configure this and their Mac OS feature known as Gatekeeper to allow only these apps that are approved. Now, they can actually choose a setting that allows installation of third-party apps as long as the apps are signed with a developer certificate issued by Apple. Now, to ensure the certificate hasn't been revoked, Mac OS uses OCSP. Now, it's short for Industry Standard Online Certificate Status Protocol, and it checks the validity of that certificate. Now, any certificate that is valid, it authenticates a website or a piece of software. Sounds simple, but it has long presented problems industry-wide that aren't easily to solve. Now, the original uses were the use of certificate revocation lists, but as the list grew, their size actually prevented them from working effectively. Now, CRL gave way to a CSP, which performed the check on remote servers. Now, they were criticized originally because they were actually sending unencrypted data across the wires. Now, they fixed that, but they still send the data. Now, unfortunately, server outages actually can still paralyze millions of people trying to install these apps or even open those apps, visit sites, or even sometimes check their email. Now, Gatekeeper is designed to make it easy for less experienced users to steer clear of apps that are known to be malicious. Now, to make use of Gatekeeper, users have to send a certain amount of information to Apple. The question is it too much data? All right, I want to bring my co-host in here. First, I want to throw it to you, Curtis. Now, Apple isn't known for its cloud services. Now, scaling up, it might be enough here. But is it a good move for Apple to depend on this external service, or is it one in the wrong direction for them?
Well, I suspect that this is one of those things that is a short-term solution. I think it is exactly the right thing to do to scale up their service capacity right now, because this is a problem that must be solved. Consumers have demanded that applications be more secure, that data storage, that data communications all be more secure. And the chief tool we have to throw against this is the certificate. So in responding to what consumers have said they want, Apple ran into problems. They've solved it with external capacity. In the long term, I think that Apple will want to have that capability in-house. So this is one where I suspect that in 12 to 18 months' time, we're going to see Apple rather quietly begin to move more of this in-house. I suspect that most consumers and even many companies will never know the difference. And that's just the way that Apple is going to want it to be.
Right. Now, Bam, from a security perspective, just-in-time verification of app validity is in the user's best interest. Now, Apple does they really need the data they're collecting, though? I think they're still collecting user, versions of the OS, when they update it, a bunch of extra data. And they're saying they need it. They need this data to be able to help protect them. Isn't just a certificate check enough?
Well, I wish a certificate check was enough. But what we know about public key cryptography is that it really only provides a limited context on what's actually there, right? So all we're getting with basic public key cryptography and OCSP in particular is just validating that the certificate's still valid. That doesn't necessarily mean that the person using it is using it in a valid way, right? And that's the trick, right? And I think maybe the argument can be made that they probably should be doing more checking on the front end before apps get into the App Store, before apps get distributed. So, and I know that Apple has done a fair amount in that regard, and most of the maintainers of app stores, whether it's Google Play or Microsoft's own application store, they do a lot to vet third-party developers and their submissions into those stores. However, the problem still remains is anybody can get a valid certificate, using things like Let's Encrypt and so on. So I not knowing the exact details of the implementation, I'm hard pressed to challenge Apple when they say, well, we need a little bit more information. If it's not PII information, and if they can, and I know that the penalties for running afoul of storing PII data, not to mention if they were ever caught with it or breached with it, are significant. So you have to extend a little trust, and that sounds a little bit funny coming from the paranoid security guy, but at some point you kind of have to trust these systems to function the way they're supposed to. But I imagine security researchers in the coming weeks and months are going to be taking a close look at this practice from Apple and dissecting just what information they're collecting and is it actually necessary. But if it's down to things like device version, operating system version, and some other contextual data, then I'm inclined to trust that it is necessary to validate not only that the certificate is valid, but how it's being used and who's using it is also valid.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, these closed application stores, like obviously Apple being the number one here, the Windows Store is another one. Obviously, Google is leaving a lot of open to be desired for their store, some of the things that they're not checking, especially on updates. But I think this whole idea of verifying certificates and making sure they're capturing these Apple and or Google or Microsoft signed things is in the best interest of the user. Obviously, the question is whether they need to be cloud connected to do that. Is really the one thing that I'm wondering. There might be some other additional things that Apple wants to do with this service later on, which is why they made it cloud connected. So that might be the interesting thing to see how this evolves over time. But I think that's it for that story. Let's jump into the next one, because we've talked about DNS a lot. We've talked about DNS. We talked about secure DNS and just how there needs to be something done here. Now, Apple and Cloudflare think they might just have the answer. Bam?
Yeah, so for decades, we've relied on DNS, the domain name system, to get us from point A to point B on the internet and guide us to the IP address of the name that's easy to remember. So when we type in google.com, something else, and that's the DNS system, figures out how to get us there. Now, Cloudflare and Apple, and in concert with, interestingly enough, Fastly, who's a competitor of Cloudflare's, are banding together to introduce a new way to secure this important protocol that we call DNS. Now, its new protocol is called Oblivious DNS, and it's a major change to the current domain name system. It translates the human-friendly names into the IP addresses, and the companies are working with the IETF, or Internet Engineering Task Force, in hopes they can make it an industry-wide standards. Abbreviated as ODOH, or Oblivious DNS, over HTTPS, builds off that separate improvement, DOH, and that itself remains in the very early stages of adoption. Now, when traffic is normally sent for lookups via regular DNS, not DNS over HTTPS or this new version, Oblivious DOH, all that traffic is unencrypted. So when I send a request off to a DNS server, anybody could intercept that and look at what I'm attempting to visit on the internet, or at least what name I'm trying to resolve to an IP address. So there's a lot of privacy issues that are presented by this. Now, they've fixed this main weakness with two different competing protocols. So we mentioned DNS over HTTPS, or DOH. There's also DNS over TLS, or DOT, and both protocols basically create an encrypted wrapper, encrypted tunnel, just like we use for HTTP, making it impossible for people to get into a man in the middle and either tamper with or view the traffic in flight. And as promising as DOH and DOT are, many people are still skeptical, mainly because it hasn't been implemented in a lot of places. Most providers have DNS servers that don't support either of these protocols. And so if you're using if you're not using one of these servers, it doesn't matter whether your browser supports it, doesn't matter whether you'd like to use it. And so this leaves the use of DNS or over HTTPS or DNS over TLS in these encrypted forms somewhat limited in their utility, unless you're a real techie person like my co-hosts here, and I imagine our guests and even our listeners. So that means it's not a very secure thing, because if only a few people use it, then only a few are benefiting. Now, there's another risk here that's not solved by this encryption of the traffic in flight in DOH or DOT, and that's where Oblivious DNS over HTTPS comes in. It addresses the shortcoming where there's a privacy risk stemming from basically the DNS provider, even if it is encrypted, can look at what you're looking up. So if I'm, say, the service provider, and I'll pick on Comcast because I enjoy picking on them, they have a DNS server, and if they're encrypting it at their end and providing the transport encryption, there's nothing to stop them from seeing what you looked up at the DNS server instance. So there's only security and integrity of the traffic in flight, and not security and integrity of the traffic at the endpoint. So whoever's providing your DNS lookup can actually see what you're doing. So Oblivious DOH is using lots of different types of symmetric key encryption and variations of DNSSEC and so on and so on. There's a bunch of things bundled under the covers here, and I encourage you to read the article and bring yourself a little bit more up to speed. But essentially, this basically puts a blindfold on the DNS server and makes it impossible for the DNS server provider to implement this. Now, the good news is that this has got a lot of support from some pretty big vendors. Cloudflare, Apple, and Fastly, with interest from Firefox, means that there's a lot of weight here. There's a lot of momentum. There's big players on the internet, but it also doesn't have the support of Google and Microsoft and some other even bigger players. So we need to see how the adoption picks up, and whether this moves out of this experimental phase and into something more like a full-blown IETF standard. Now, this isn't the first attempt at securing DNS, right? So this is, we've talked about DOH and DOT, but there's prior efforts with DNSSEC, which is securing the actual requests, encrypting the requests themselves. So going to kind of throw it over to my hosts and talk to it. And first, we want to go to Lou. This change requires like a ton of fixes to moving parts, and ISPs haven't adopted any of these other prior protocols. So do you think that this is going to have any like real traction? Do you think there's a future or a possible version of the future where this gets adopted?
It's interesting because we've seen this with even Google doing with their Chrome browser. In Chromium, they're trying to push this whole secure DNS mechanism. And they're able to do it because they own, 80-something% of the browser share, even more so now with the Edge Chromium version that they're using out there from Microsoft. So I think that, in order to have the movement go forward, you need to support there, both from the ISPs, supporting the protocols, but also the traffic and the browsers and the applications supporting it as well. And so I think there needs to be a lot of things, things that needs to fall in place for it to work. So Apple just doing it on their platform and on their, whether it's Safari or other browser that they support, that might not be enough. So I think, there needs to be a lot more moving parts and a lot more partnerships for this to support. So I would say, yeah, it'll move forward, but I'm going to say it's probably not in the next, 2 or 3 years. I think they're going to need some time to actually adapt, move their OS in that direction, and get the support they need from platforms. Now,
I'm going to go and take a different tack and throw it over to you, Curt. What's the incentive here, right? So we've talked about sort of the technical challenges, but I'd like to ask you to put your business hat on for a second. And what's the incentive for DNS providers? Is there a version of the future where the providers will adopt this and give up their right or their capability to essentially eavesdrop on their customers' traffic? Because I would imagine the providers of the world are applying analytics to what's being looked up on their DNS servers and using it in whatever ways they see fit to improve their network and monetize their services. So what do you think? Is there enough incentive here for providers to adopt these types of technologies that would blind them to the information that their users are trying to look up?
Well, I think the incentive has to be the customers insisting that they want the security. And when security of whichever of the forms it is taking right now becomes a competitive advantage, then we'll start to see the providers getting on board. Now, I think what we're going to probably see is providers trying desperately to first adopt any of the current solutions that will allow them to continue to provide what they will call improved performance. So doing traffic smoothing. And let's not forget that in a day when network neutrality is no longer a consideration, they may very well feel like they need to see the destination, need to see the contents of DNS in order to decide whether a particular stream should be privileged or should be charged in a different way. To me, the most difficult part of all this is the fact that we have had so very many potential solutions to what is essentially the same problem, making sure that DNS requests are private. The issue is that we really only need one of these, and we need some large portion of the service provider world to come in and circle around one of these and adopt it. Right now, it's difficult for people out on the client end, out on the endpoint side of the equation, to build a stack that includes all of these things. And as we all know, TCP/IP stacks are complex enough and vulnerable enough as it is. So right now, I think that this is a lovely thought, but what it's really going to take is a lot of customers saying we must have this or we'll find another provider to make the providers move in this direction.
Thanks a lot, Curt. I couldn't agree more. Customer demand at the end of the day, customers wanting more security is the only way we're going to get these providers to move forward. And DNS has been the source of DDoS, misdirection, other types of attacks. And I think the time is long past for something to happen to make it more secure. Wish we could chat about it more, but I'm going to throw it back to you, Lou, for what I believe is another one of our great sponsors.
It is. Before we get to our guests, we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is LastPass. Now, I just love LastPass. Now, companies face cybersecurity threats no matter where employees are working, whether they're connecting from an office or from home like me. The risks of cyber attacks are higher, such as data loss, data breaches. There are something companies need to plan for, and they need to work to mitigate these things. Well, a solid cybersecurity strategy is arguably more important while employees are working from home, given that there are more factors to deal with, like from Wi-Fi networks to shared devices, maybe outside the direct control of IT here. Now, that's why LastPass is so crucial to protecting your business. Now, IT and security leaders can take back control of password security. They'll have the control they need from a central dashboard. Now, businesses can customize admin privileges, ensuring that any given admin has only the right level of access here. No matter your organization's source of truth, LastPass integrates to onboard users, sync those groups, and even revoke access when they need to. Now, access to security scores and dark web monitoring to see real-time readouts of your business's password hygiene and provide alerts to employees when credentials may be at risk is all that they do here. Now, for every employee, you can view their password scores, gain access to shared accounts, monitor group memberships, and much, much more. Now, LastPass zero-knowledge security model protects everyone from the individual user to the biggest organization. Now, they allow employees to go passwordless while giving them access to the tools they need to be productive and do their work. Now, LastPass ensures a lot of things here: the complete security of the cloud with strong encryption algorithms, local-only encryption on the device encryption, multi-factor authentication, support for Active Directory, much, much more. IT leaders need to invest now in upgrading or adding security technologies that make remote work safer and more productive. And LastPass is really the best way to start. Now, don't wait until the end of the year to get strong security. Start solidifying your cybersecurity strategy with the award-winning LastPass today. Go to lastpass.com/twit to find out how they can help you. That's lastpass.com/twit. And we thank LastPass for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, this is my favorite part of the show, where we bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the TWiT riot. Today, we have Senior Product Marketing Manager with Pulse Secure, Bryan Embrey. Welcome to the show, Bryan.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here. Really pleasure. It's good being part of the show.
Thanks for being here. Well, we have a very relevant topic to talk about today regarding securely accessing cloud applications, especially multi-cloud ones. But, before we get to that, our audience loves to hear people's origin stories. Can you maybe take us through a short journey through tech and what brought you to Pulse Secure?
Yeah, I've been part of Silicon Valley now for longer than I care to admit. But what brought me to Pulse has been recent developments in secure access, especially regarding software-defined perimeters and things like that. Was part of a startup that was early on in this space, and the move to Pulse was very logical. And they have been a key player in secure remote access for many years, starting even before the Pulse was spun out from Juniper.
Now, we're gonna get to a topic. We've covered zero trust before, but I want to lay a bit more groundwork here, just maybe giving the audience a little bit of a refresher. Can you maybe take us through what the concept of zero trust, and then we'll go back to what that means for hybrid cloud and remote access?
Sure. Zero trust really centers on the topic of never trust and always verify. Back when networks were first architected, there was the concept of a network perimeter, and trust was sort of implied. The resources that you were accessing were controlled by your corporation, and that sort of model was valid for many years. But as with the migration of applications to the cloud, full BYOD device capabilities, the dispersal of workers to mobile and remote areas, as well as the applications themselves moving to public, private, and hybrid clouds. That concept of implied trust really does start to show some issues, along with the prevalence and sophistication of malware. And so Zero Trust sort of tries to enforce a level of validation, verification, both of the users, the devices, making sure that application access is controlled, encrypted, and that sort of thing.
Now, with that additional level, obviously, it sometimes takes additional work to get this done, to be able to follow Zero Trust principles, and to set up these types of environments. From a key issues perspective, what are you seeing? What people have to do to plan for remote access, especially to hybrid clouds now with some of these services out there? Right.
Well, initially, first off, it's important to know that most organizations are probably doing some level of Zero Trust already. It is not something to be looked at in terms of, I've got to do this gigantic forklift thing to get there. But in terms of looking at migrating to hybrid clouds, especially depending on the size of the organization, it's important to consider whether or not the vendor or vendors you're going to work with really have a global presence. Can they support a variety of different clouds? Do they do things like check devices that were being used? Do we manage the devices? Do we check the devices for the presence of malware and things like that? Do we look at policy controls? Do they offer things like single sign-on and the integration with identity providers and things like that? So I'm sure virtually all organizations are doing some level of this, but it is important to look across the board at a vendor's capabilities in this area to make sure that they're the correct vendor to work with.
Now, you brought up single sign-on. I mean, that's an important thing to ensure productivity of people and their organization. But one thing that we're seeing, especially with remote access, is people more moving closer to the MFA, the multi-factor requirement, especially for remote access. Does this add additional complexity here, especially for hybrid cloud? And how are you guys solving this?
Yeah, multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication is critical, especially given the prevalence of people using more than one device to access applications. And it's important to look at single sign-on and MFA kind of together. You want to make sure that everything integrates with an identity store and things like that. But single sign-on can streamline the application login process. It reduces the chance of stolen credentials. We go a step further by making sure that do source IP validation and things like that. And then in terms of MFA, working with standards-based processes and with integrations with things like Google Authenticator, temporary one-time passwords, even an integration with Windows Hello for Business with biometrics. And we extend that a little bit further using a dynamic approach, meaning that if a user logs in consistently from, say, one location using one device, and then all of a sudden they look at they come in from another location that's maybe anomalous, we may subject that device to further checks to make sure that that user is who they say they are and that device is the device that's been validated and authorized.
Now, if we relate this kind of back to Zero Trust, obviously with SSO, it almost goes against Zero Trust. So you're saying that integrating in MFA in between there will help obviously go closer to the Zero Trust model. But obviously that puts a little hamper on things, because that means that, whether, let's say your data storage, your cloud storage use one provider or one identity, and obviously the same identity needs to be available to access, let's say, your cloud application over here. And so there's different clouds, and like you said, hybrid clouds that need to be able to access. Does that mean that you have to authenticate every time you access these different clouds, or is SSO actually achievable here?
I think it's a matter of degree and to the extent to which the deployment works. I do think that there's a certain amount of integration that has to happen. Not all cloud providers are using the same identity stores, obviously, but being able to have that flexibility to work with multiple identity providers, I think, is critical when you work with a secure remote access vendor to make sure that the deployment flexibility is there as much as possible.
Right. Now, in your press release, you actually say that you use the term multi-tenancy. Can you maybe explain what that means and maybe what kind of authentication authorities you guys support in the back end?
Sure. I mean, in multi-tenancy, we're keeping everything separate. We are making sure that tokens, the keys are all separate from tenant to tenant, and that we do work with the back-end integration or back-end authentication mechanisms. We do a whole bunch of different things in terms of authentication, from hardware tokens, smart cards, as I mentioned, Google Authenticator, as well as things like LDAP, AD, Radius, and so on. But the idea here is that we make sure that all data is kept. We call it data sovereignty. That data is kept separate on a customer by customer basis, and we actually don't have any visibility into that data. And so we're making sure that those customers are completely secure end to end. We just broker the conversation.
I got it. Well, when we come back, we have a lot more to talk about here, and I want to bring my co-host back in. But before we get to all that, we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that is Melissa. Now, have you ever forgotten to check the date on a carton of milk? I know I have. I have lots of kids. I have lots of milk. I tend to forget. It's easy to store it away and just forget about it. Now, like milk, your customer data can go bad, sometimes even faster than milk. Now, put it into perspective, up to 30% of customer data goes bad each and every year. Think about your customer base. That is a lot of customers. That's when Melissa is there for you. Melissa makes sure your data is accurate and current so you can reach the right people, your customers. You did the work to make them your customers. Melissa makes it so you can have reliable customer data. Now, if you're wondering how effective Melissa is, just know that they've been helping businesses maintain fresh data for over 35 years. Now, Melissa can help you identify your customers and get to know them better. Think about how valuable it could be if your organization could verify email addresses, addresses, phone numbers, and names in real time. That's right. With Melissa, you can do that. Now, Melissa's global address verification service verifies addresses for 240 plus countries and territories at the point of entry. Now, this ensures that only valid billing and shipping addresses are captured and used in your systems. Plus, if you're looking for new customer leads, Melissa can help you here as well, because identifying current customers allows you to find new prospective customers through Melissa's prospect database as well. Now, you all know I'm the API guy. I live and breathe them every day. Now, I use Melissa's APIs, and they're really easy to get the data you need on your customers when you need it in real time. Now, Melissa's flexible deployment options offer different platforms to suit any preference, even business size or even budget. With flexible on-premise web services, secure FTP processing, and software as a service delivery options, you can choose the best way to meet your unique business needs. And Melissa continually undergoes independent security audits. They reinforce their commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements all the time. They have the utmost dedication to data security by implementing strong controls and safeguards when actually processing your data. They are also SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliant. Very important. And I probably told you this story a bunch, but I think the U.S. Postal Service needs to use Melissa, because I actually requested recently a redelivery of my mail. I entered the address, and I actually fat fingered the wrong address, and it all resolved wrong. And mind you, I've lived here for 10 years, and if they had Melissa, they would have been able to instantly verify, hey, user, you entered this wrong. It's wrong address. Now, over 10,000 businesses trust the address experts. And with the holiday season right around the corner, it's time to take control of your customer data. Trust Melissa to be your foundation for data-driven success. Melissa's supporting communities and qualifying essential workers during COVID-19. See if your organization qualifies for 6 months of free service by applying online. Don't put up with sour customer contact data. Try Melissa's APIs into the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit. And we thank Melissa for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we've been talking with Bryan Embrey. He's the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Pulse Secure. We've been talking about multi-cloud support and accessing these applications securely, a little bit about SSO, a little bit about MFA. But I do want to bring my co-host back in here. I want to first get an enterprise view of the world, and I want to start with Curt. Curt?
Well, one of the questions that I have about zero trust security and your solution in particular, but all zero trust, I occasionally will get press releases and statements from companies saying basically, you know what, you can get rid of your VPNs, you can get rid of all your other security thing. Zero trust will solve all of your security problems. How close to reality do you think that is? Are you willing to tell people that upon deploying your solution that they can get rid of all their VPNs, get rid of all of their other encryption, get rid of their firewalls and everything else? Or do you think that maybe you're part of a solution?
It's a good question. I think so. The fact that we're having the zero trust conversation is the right time to have it, given the way that the enterprise, especially in the last 6 to 9 months, has sort of shifted. That being said, organizations around the world have a great deal invested in VPNs. And we're not submitting that people should throw away their existing VPNs by any stretch of the imagination. Zero trust is more of an evolutionary process. The sort of core tenets that we believe are part of a zero trust solution are basically, making sure users are who they say they are, validating the devices, managing the control of application access through policy, and then making sure the data is protected and encrypted. So that, and again, many organizations are already implementing some level of zero trust today. Doing so to get a complete zero trust end-to-end process is going to be evolutionary and take some time. We recently announced Pulse Zero Trust Access. Again, taking that software-defined perimeter approach does adhere to zero trust principles of, always verify everybody, but it also uses the standard SDP model, separating the control and the data planes, making sure that users are authenticated and authorized before the connection takes place, and then restricting access to specific applications that are governed by policy. So I think we can see the end goal in sight, being that a software-defined perimeter world is probably again in reach, but it will take some time to get there.
Well, you said one thing that was very interesting there when you were talking about the evolution and even the evolution of these deployments. So one of the questions I also had, another phrase that's typically used in conjunction with zero trust is microsegmentation, because obviously it's one thing to have zero trust at the perimeter, but to be really effective, you've got to have it at multiple stages throughout the application chain. So when you talk to customers, how much of that conversation is around re-architecting their application stack, or do you find that when they're already using multiple clouds, that they're already fairly well segmented from a security standpoint?
I think we see a blend in some cases. I think we see some who are a little bit more maybe advanced than others in terms of how much segmentation they've got. They're always looking to stay abreast of the latest developments. And microsegmentation, as you say, is a very key part of that conversation. I think that it's more of a continuum, and we have customers who are maybe further along, but for those customers who are maybe a little bit more interested in learning and adopting more microsegmentation concepts, they are certainly looking to things like software-defined perimeters, maybe not necessarily deploying them enterprise-wide, but perhaps deploying them for work groups or specific kinds of applications or doing test runs or something like that.
Thank you, Curt. I do want to bring Bam in because, Bam, you could probably talk till you're blue in the face about security here. Have any questions about that?
Yeah, so I'm going to take it a slightly different direction than you might expect and talk about user experience. And I think, that's one of the things that's vital for the new normal, right? Everybody's working from home now, and now there's an expectation that everything is just kind of work. And can you talk to us, Bryan, a little bit about, how Pulse Secure approaches, addressing that requirement in terms of, ensuring that not only is everything secure and segmented and all that, but actually a good experience for the end user so that they can get their job done wherever they're working from?
Yeah, user experience is, I think, much more critical now than it has been certainly in the past. And we look at it in terms of making sure that the user experience is as streamlined and as simple as possible. Users are smart, very intelligent, and if there are inefficiencies or inflexibilities or something like that, they're going to look up ways to bypass them. So the idea is to make the connection process very streamlined, very simple, and very secure. Pulse takes a very unified approach. We have a single client that spans our entire portfolio. So the user uses that single client regardless of which product within our portfolio they're using to access applications. We also have a clientless option as well, but the idea is that client is as simple to use as possible. The user experience is the same regardless of the application that they're using or the product within the Pulse portfolio that they're using, so that there's no retraining required. That client can be downloaded by the user, does not require a whole lot of administrative involvement, that sort of thing. So yeah, user experience is very key to making sure that data stays secure end to end.
So if I'm going to follow up here with one more question, and it's again about ease of use, it's more, but it's on the other side. It's on the administrative ease of use end. Can you talk to us a little bit about, what it's like as an administrator to deal with, perhaps multiple identity service providers and Pulse Secure support for those, as well as not just two-factor auth, but true multi-factor auth, and how you approach that in terms of integration with multiple, different types of, second or third or fourth factor types of authentication.
Right. The administrator user experience is also critical. We want to make that as intuitive as possible. We want to make sure that administrators can set up the policies, administer the policies, and troubleshoot the policies because they're going to set them up at one time and then possibly as many as several months later come back and possibly revise them. So we want to make the overall policy creation and administration as easy as possible. In terms of making sure that users have the capabilities of integrating with their existing infrastructure, we've got a full set of APIs. We make it very compelling, I guess, a very simple process of integrating with as many identity stores and providers as possible. We integrate with Okta, Ping Identity, Microsoft AD as well. We do things, smart cards, Google Authenticator, as I mentioned, Duo, certificates, all sorts of things. So we provide the capabilities within the administrative console to integrate with, as we believe, as a heterogeneous an environment as any customer might have.
Unfortunately, all things good must come to an end. Bryan, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you being on. We're running a little bit low on time. I did want to give you a chance to tell the folks at home where they can go and learn more about Pulse Secure and how they can get started. Yeah,
thank you. We have trials of Pulse Connect Secure, or SSL VPN, as well as a trial of Pulse Zero Trust Access, all available on pulsesecure.net. We encourage everybody to go there and take a look at some materials and sign up for our trials and have a go. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's been fun to be part of the inner sanctum.
Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another hour of the best dang enterprise podcast in the universe. So tune your podcatcher to TWiT. I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible. It's a team effort, and we have the best team in the market. My co-host, starting with our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, what's going on for you in the coming weeks, and where can people find you and all of your work?
Well, we're winding down the year, and good thing that all of the threat actors, criminals, and hackers just, typically take the end of December off because they've got nothing to do. No, we're going to be busy keeping up with what's going on in the world of cybersecurity. You can find me at the edge of dark reading and dark reading itself. I've got a handful of really interesting things, I think, coming up, including an article that'll be out towards the end of next week on some cybersecurity professionals' advice for Santa in this crazy year. Some very specific advice that I think is going to be applicable to lots and lots of folks.
Thank you, Curtis, for being here. Well, we also thank our very own Mr. Bryan McHenry. Bam, since you can't play in the stove this coming week, where can people find you during the busy week? What are you doing? And where could they find you online?
Well, you can always find me at BA McHenry on Twitter, but I've got to plug once again. We just keep getting great guests. If you love this show, you might also love our community show over at F5 is Dev Central Connects. And it's a YouTube channel, and we go live every Thursday afternoon at 3:30 Eastern time. That would be 12:30 Pacific. And great guests every week. You can also check out, while you're over there on our YouTube channel, check out the Lightboard lessons from my friends John Wagnon and Jason Rahm. If you just want to get into the geeky, hardcore, how do we put stuff together? How do we solve problems in your enterprise network? You love this show, you'll love that show. And go ahead and check it out. And maybe one of these days I'll guest over there again as well.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here. Well, we also have to thank you as well. You're the person who drops in each and every week to watch and to listen to our show, to get your enterprise and IT news. And we want to make sure it's easy for you to watch and catch up on your news each week. Go to our show page right now, twit.tv/TWiT. There you'll find all of our amazing back episodes, the show notes, co-host information, the guest information, and links of the stories we do during the show. But more importantly, next to those videos, you'll get those helpful subscribe and download links as well. Support the show by getting your audio version, your video version of your choice, and listen in on any one of your devices and any one of your podcast applications, because we're on all of them. So go check it out and subscribe. Now, it's the best way to stay on top of your enterprise and IT news. Best way, support us. Subscribe. Now, after you subscribe, impress your friends, your family, your coworkers with the gift of TWiT, because we know we have a lot of fun tech topics on the show, and I can guarantee that they'll find them interesting as well. Now, if you've already subscribed and you're available during the Friday PM time of 1:30 Pacific, we do the show live.twit.tv. If you want to come see how the pizza's made, come see the behind the scenes, come check it out right now, live.twit.tv. You can see all the fun that we do here. Plus, if you're going to watch the show live, you might as well jump into the chat room live as well. That's right. We have a great chat room going on right now, irc.twit.tv. Some great characters. We get some great questions and discussion points from there. So go ahead and jump in there if you're going to be watching the show live. Now, if you can't be part of the show live, but you're already subscribed and you can't be part of the discussion, that's okay, because there's still a great, amazing community out there. It's 24/7 discussion. It's the TWiT community. It's out there right now, twit.community. Great website. We talk about all the shows that we do, all the episodes, all the hosts are out there. Some really great discussion. So definitely check it out. Come join us at twit.community. Remember, you can always follow me, twitter.com/SlowMem. I post all my enterprise tidbits, all the things, all my curmudgeon topics that I have about products that are going on, especially during the holiday season. Plus, I also post a lot about my, what I do at my work week at Microsoft. If you want to know more about that, you could always go to developers.microsoft.com/office. We post the latest and greatest ways to customize your Office experience to enable it to be more productive for you and your organization. I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support This Week in Enterprise Tech each and every week, and we do not do the show without them. So thank you for all their support. I also want to thank all the staffers at TWiT, especially the engineers. I want to thank Mr. Brian Cheebert. He is packing to go to a trek across the country, but he's not only our co-host, but he's also our tireless producer as well. He does all the bookings and the plannings for the show, and we really couldn't do the show without him. So thank you. He's lurking in the chat room right now in our back channel. He's supporting us there as well. So thank you again, Cheebert, for all your support. And before we sign out, we have to thank our editor, Victor. He makes us look good. And of course, who also make us look good live, especially Mr. Ant Pruitt. And you're a busy guy. You have lots of shows. Anything coming up this week that you want to plug? Anything interesting you want to share with the TWiT fan base here?
Well, of course, I want to share hands-on photography and hands-on wellness, dealing more so with our wonderful viewers and listener feedback. So go check that out. You may have your email answered right on there.
Thank you. I definitely have learned a lot of awesome tips and tricks, especially with Lightroom and Photoshop. So thank you again, Ant, for all your great content. Well, until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.
Hi, I'm Jason Howell, host of All About Android. Each week, I'm joined by my co-hosts Ron Richards and Florence Ion, as well as a whole rotating cast of guests, journalists in the Android space, experts, developers, and even people working on Android behind the scenes at Google. We talk about everything that has to do with Android, and you don't want to miss a single episode so you know what's going on behind the scenes. That's twit.tv/AAA. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode.